All righty, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Life After Infidelity. And as always, I am Brianna Latrice, your favorite affair recovery coach. And as I share with you guys all the time, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000s for the voice of people who have experienced the ultimate betrayal of infidelity in their relationships. And today I am super excited for the guest that I have on the platform today. She is no stranger to the social media world. And I just, you guys, man, just reached out in faith, sent a message to this amazing woman, and she responded. She answered the call. So I am super excited to get into this conversation on today. Let me introduce you a little bit about. I'm gonna hold a name off y'all because I'm excited. But she is a Chicago-based actress, singer, songwriter. Like she got so many hits, y'all. Filmmaker, speaker, full-time creative, specializing in producing content that is comedic, inspirational, and impactful. She celebrates on her platform with laughter for self-care and highlights amazing brands that provide fun, quality service products and experiences. And so I am super excited to bring up none other than the amazing Miss Crystal Luster. How you doing, girl?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me. And hello, everyone who is listening and watching. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I am doing so well. I'm in Texas. And so this Texas heat, it's a real thing. So
Oh,
like, yeah, like by the time it is 11 o'clock, we already like at 99 degrees.
yeah. Texas, y'all sun shines a little different. I was just recently in Dallas and I was like, oh, what kind of sun is this? Y'all got like premium sun, like a premium subscription to the sun. I still got like the trial base where you get the commercial breaks.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
Chicago, it's hot now. It's hot. It's in the 90s up here right now, so we hot.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
it's gonna be in the 80s, in the 70s this weekend. So we only got that trial basis, but y'all got the premium subscription. I don't want no parts of that.
Girl, that's funny. You talking about premium subscription.
I'm
So basically what you're saying is you probably not gonna move to Texas no
you
time soon.
know now Dallas is on my list of places that if I had to move to Texas, I would be interested in Dallas. I have yet to visit Austin, so that
Okay.
but Houston is a no for me. I love y'all, but it's a no for me. That sun right there, y'all have the
It's
ultimate
bad.
subscription. Okay, y'all pay the annual fee, like everything up front, because that sun right there is hot.
No,
Mhm.
it is. Like it's so funny because we would talk about that. Like when we go south that way, we're like, but they're like, but it's Texas. But I'm like, you don't
No,
understand.
it's
It's different.
different.
It's
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
So okay, so why I know I'm going to get into the conversation, but why Dallas? I'm curious to know because Dallas is such a booming and growing city. So I love to hear from people like, why would Dallas be on your list to move?
So I like Dallas for a couple reasons. One, I have family down there. I have family in Houston too, but I like the
Okay.
layout of Dallas. It reminds me a lot of Chicago, just as far as how everything is kind of organized. In the evening time, it gets cooler, so there's a little bit of break. Houston, it was
Mhm.
just hot all the time, and my attitude don't really do too well with just being hot and uncomfortable all the time. And other people, they don't shower nearly as much as they should for that kind of weather. So it's a good balance. I feel like in Dallas. I had really good food in both places, but I felt
Okay.
like Dallas had a lot of what I could be accustomed to. So especially the weather, the layout, the food, the shopping. Yeah, that was pretty much it for me. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, hey, we're growing, so we'll welcome you, honey. If you can get adjusted to this heat, you're more than welcome to come
ooh,
on.
we
Come to
still working
Texas.
on that.
But listen, okay, so Crystal, what made me reach out to you was so many people were sending me your videos about you were talking about your divorce and everything like that. And some people were like, you should reach out to her, you should reach out to her. And of course, right, like your platform, it began with a focus on comedy. And so I was really shocked, first of all, like most people were when I told my story that you were married, and now you're sharing about your divorce. And it was funny because you were like, people don't listen when they were talking about you spent that much on the dress. You were like the wedding, y'all. The wedding.
Yeah.
But I'm curious to know, what made you, even though your platform is, you know, it started off with comedy, but now you're starting to incorporate a little bit of that into it. What made you start to share that part of your life?
It's interesting. When you start down the journey of being an influencer and being a public figure, you kind of have to decide what you'll share and what you won't share. And I
Mm,
think there were a couple different deciding factors for me getting into that more serious portion.
yeah.
First and foremost, I am a mental health advocate. I stand by and always encourage people to go to therapy. Therapy is so essential, especially our Christ followers, people who are in church, people who believe in Jesus. Like, yes, you can pray, you can read the Bible, you can fast, but says go to therapy.
Yes.
Okay, there is safety in a multitude of wise counsel. Therapy is good.
Yeah.
And I think in that journey, both before I left and after I left, and throughout my divorce process, and after getting divorced and all of that, like therapy has played such a huge part in it, and it is what led me here,
Mhm.
as far as becoming the person that I am, the person that people see.
Yeah.
And it was really eye-opening for me, this journey that I've been on personally. And like, I tell people all the time, I built my brand organically, especially over these last few years, because I've been, hustling as a creative for over a decade, almost 2 decades now.
Oh,
But
wow.
as
Okay, that's
far as,
amazing.
yeah, like I started in music. A lot of people don't really know that because that was before, way before TikTok, way before like Instagram, like all that. I had been singing and writing and stuff like that. But these last few years, I grew a platform, a pretty significant platform across
Mhm.
these four different apps that I post on daily. And a lot of that growth is attributed to authenticity. And so
Yep.
I kind of had a conversation with myself, like, I know that I'm funny. I know that people enjoy my reactions. They enjoy,
Yeah.
the jokes and the point of views and all of that. But I'm more than that. And if I'm
Mm,
really going to be true to being authentic, then I should share some of these other parts. So it was partly being true to who I am as a person, but then also I found people starting to reach out to me. So what happened was that there was a pretty subtle, but I guess not so subtle change in my content where, when I was married, I was pretty consistent, but the topics of my content were different. The way that I showed up, as far as like how I looked, how I dressed, how
oh,
colorful I
really?
was, different things. Yeah, there was a very stark difference between the Crystal that showed up in 2021 and 2022 versus the Crystal who shows up now. And so I
Why
started
was
getting
that?
inboxes. You said, what was it?
I said, "Why was that?"
Yeah, so I'll kind of circle back to that. I started getting
Okay.
inboxes, and there were people who knew me, from childhood or from growing up. And it was like, hey, I'm noticing a change in your content. And I just want to ask, are you still married? And the more I started getting those questions and just kind of privately sharing what I had been through, and there were some people who reached out and they were just like, man, I felt led to ask you because I'm going through
Wow.
XYZ and I want
Mhm.
to know if you have experienced this. And I said, well, let me tell you a little bit about what I've been going through behind the scenes. And they were like, man, I noticed something was different. So kind of circle back to what you were just asking. What changed? I became a lot more colorful. People noticed that there was no wedding ring in my
Okay.
videos. People noticed that the content of what I was talking about was a little more different. I felt more free, so I expressed myself a little more freely. I
Okay.
was more consistent.
Okay.
And my environment changed. I went from doing videos in my old house to like, they're like, oh, you moved. Like, what's this new place that you're living at? And now I'm not talking about marriage so much or talk, so there are
Yeah.
gradual changes that people started noticing.
Mhm.
And what really prompted me to really share, when Risa Tisa came out about her story with
Yes.
her legion,
Yep.
and just it was such an impactful experience because
Mhm.
everybody was talking about it, from the commoners, the spectators, all the way to the celebrities. And it changed
Mhm.
her life. But
It
more
did.
importantly, it opened up the conversation to talk about what happens behind closed doors in marriages. And
Mhm.
I saw an opportunity not to duplicate what she did, but more so have a more painful conversation because the church does not like to talk about it, right? She didn't necessarily talk about
Yeah.
the church impact and the biblical impact and, you know, religious impacts of marriage. She stayed within her story and her personal
Yeah.
experience, which I
Mhm.
appreciate that. I think that was great for her. I saw
Mhm.
an opportunity to kind of unpack what I wish I would have known versus the religious and legalistic rhetoric that I had grown up with.
Yeah.
And I was terrified to start that conversation and
You were
tell
you were
that story.
scared to share?
Oh my God, I was terrified for a couple reasons, right?
Okay.
One, saints don't do too well with controversial conversations.
You're right. You're right
they
about
don't
it.
they don't they don't like it. They don't, as progressive as I think we have become, and as much as we've tried to, you know, grow with the times and figure out how to
Mhm.
fit into this new world, we go from one extreme to the other. Either
Mhm.
everything is okay or nothing is okay, and there's no
Right.
happy medium of figuring out, okay, what does the church look like modern day? How
Yeah.
do we apply biblical principles and actually make them fit? And we, as a church, as a body, don't do that very well.
Mhm.
And the church itself has a really bad reputation. And that is
Yeah.
a big, heavy burden on my heart,
Yeah.
because when I tell people, like, I love God for real. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's
Yeah.
like, we here. And I think people, most of the time, people know that, like, from watching my content. I try to keep it clean. Like, there are certain principles that I
Yeah.
have. Like, I'm not overtly, oh, Jesus, Bible, like all of that, because that's not who I am.
Right.
I'm an approachable person. I can have a conversation about it. I'm not about to argue with you. I'm gonna preach love all the time.
Mhm.
And whenever I would be out in public and I tell somebody, like, if they would ask, oh, you're a Christian, I'd be like, yeah, then they get the, oh,
Isn't that crazy that Christianity now is like the new shame?
yeah.
Mhm.
Yes. It's like, if who all here are Christians?
You
And
be
it's
scared to raise your hand.
and it's not because I'm ashamed of God. It's not.
Yeah.
It's because the church at large has a really bad reputation for
Mhm.
being judgmental, being dismissive, everybody going to hell, everybody is strict, like all of these things. And so I was like, you know what? It's about time to have this conversation, because
Yeah.
what's happening more and more, and this is the last thing, and it's like I can tie up the answer to this long answer to this question. Um, I kind of surveyed a bunch of people who, like me, grew up in church, had these ideals of what marriage and family would be like based on their upbringing.
Okay.
And out of, let's say, 10 people, about 6 or 7 of them are all divorced. And
Yeah.
these are beautiful, intelligent, successful, God fearing women who
Mhm.
still have a relationship with God, who still go to church, all divorced.
Yeah.
And so I said, now what's wrong with this picture, right? If
Right.
this is a such a holy institution, what are the commonalities? What's the common denominator between all of us that we have not lived out this expectation that we are taught? And what I came to realize is that a lot of us are ill prepared,
Yeah.
and because of that, because of that, in conjunction with, you know, the subject matter of this podcast and of your platform, dealing with infidelity, dealing with lies, manipulation,
Mhm.
mental abuse, physical abuse, like all the
Yep.
different things, you
Mhm.
start to see the unraveling of this institution. But we are not having important conversations beforehand to keep
Yeah.
us from going down that road. And so
Yeah.
I said, okay, God, send me. And I started having that conversation. And there have been some negative comments, but for the most part, people have been so receptive. And apparently, this conversation is needed. I've had men and women reaching out to me saying that they've gone through the same things and
Yeah.
asking for advice, asking for prayer, asking for guidance, and just thanking me for my bravery and sharing. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think people realize like what it takes to come out and share an experience of divorce. Because like you said, you have to go through all of these judgments from people. And I love what you said in one of your YouTube videos where you were like, so my tagline is removing the shame of your decision to leave or stay, because whether you leave or stay, both decisions will be hard. And I love that you spoke to that as well. And I was like, ah, yeah, this is a woman who's been through the experience, because
Mhm.
so many times you will have people like, okay, because my main thing is infidelity, right? And time again, yeah, okay, true example. Like, I've had friends when I was going through infidelity in my marriage, they were like, you need to leave, you crazy for staying. And then they turned around and their partner cheated on them, and they were trying to stay and make it work. And so there's so much judgment. And that's why I love what you shared on your platform of like, whatever decision it is, just be prepared for the fight, because it's going to be hard. And when I watched your YouTube, your 9 things that you as a Christian bride that you wish you would have known, I actually called one of my friends, and she's currently going through a divorce, and we met in church. And I said, you know what? There is a common denominator between church hurt and divorces. And so that's something now that's on my radar that I'm about to start figuring out, because I kid you not, I probably only had 2 clients who haven't mentioned church hurt as they're
Mhm.
going through the infidelity. And you mentioned too about church hurt. So kind of explain to you, like in your term, what do you say, or what does church hurt mean to you? And then how did you manage to navigate through that? Because I know some people, because their marriage was so impactful and it ended up in divorce, they left the church altogether and they haven't went back. I actually left the church in 2018 when I was going through what I was going through. No, I'm lying to you. Hold on. It was longer than that. It was 7 years. I left the church for 7 years. I
Mhm.
went back in 2020. The first time I ever stepped back in church was in 2020. But prior to that, 2013, I said, never going, like, I was that broken and that hurt. And so, how did you navigate through that church hurt for women who may be listening to this?
That's such an important question. And
Mm-hmm.
it's layered, right? So there can be church hurt whether or not you're married, and I just want to kind of say that as a base.
Yep.
Again, kind of going with that alignment of the church has a bad reputation of dealing with people, but the church isn't a people business. And so you kind of, you know what I
That's
mean?
true.
It defeats the purpose. Like, we really have to do better. And so I think a lot of people experience church hurt because when life happens and you're not this picture perfect Christian, which nobody is, by the way,
Yeah.
um, you get this backlash from the church, these legalistic, Pharisee, Sadducee type of responses that lead you into isolation and shame. And the
Mm-hmm.
truth of the matter is that nobody can live like that, right? If
Yeah.
you are going home and you're dealing with self loathing on a regular basis, you hate yourself either because you cannot meet the standard, or you hate yourself because you feel like everybody else hates you. So you might as well join in, right? And that is kind of wrapped up in church hurt. And so what people end up doing, it becomes easier for them to separate themselves from the
Yeah.
thing that causes them to feel this shame and this self-loathing, rather than figure out how they can coexist. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a big part of the exodus from church. Now, when it comes to marriage, kind of in that same line but just niched down, the church is very vocal about marriage, right? Based on scripture. So I got a bunch of people in my comments now, and I got some comments that were had or given during um, me leaving, right? And it was the scriptures that talk about how God hates divorce.
Yeah.
So funny because I'm actually about to drop a video that I already know. I say in the beginning of the video, this is gonna ruffle some feathers. It's gonna make some people mad. And quite frankly, I don't care. Sorry, not sorry. But the thing to note is that yes, God hates divorce
Mm-hmm.
because he hates division.
Mm-hmm.
God's very nature is community.
Yeah.
He loved the world so much that he decided to give his only son to be clothed in all of our shame and all of our sin, just to restore us to himself, because he hates being divided from us. That's his nature. If you understand scripture in its totality within context, and you understand that is God's nature, he hates divorce because he hates division.
Yeah.
but God loves you more. People in church tend to struggle with that because they only want to see God hates divorce. And so
Yeah.
when I started talking about I'm leaving, or people will come up be like, "Oh, where's your husband?" I was like, "I don't know. I'm
Mhm.
I left. We've been
Mhm.
separated for 6 months." Oh my
Mhm.
God, you've gotta work this out.
You gotta go
God
back.
honors. You gotta
Pray,
go
pray.
back. You gotta pray. If you all just do this one class that the church is offering, I just know you can work it out. And I said, sis, listen, I was in an abusive marriage. He did not
Yeah.
honor our vows. I'm not
Would you
going
say
back.
that to them, or that was what you were thinking?
Oh no, I said it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I said it. I said it. And there were some people who were very receptive, like, "Oh, I didn't know you hid it so well." And I'm like, who wants to broadcast that?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
embarrassing. It's hurtful. It's you trying to figure out, well, how much should I lean into this principle of, love covers a multitude of sin?
Yeah.
How much do I lean into that? Because we say it because it's cute and it's biblical and it's like it's in this little box. Then you get into it and you're dealing with abuse and you're dealing with all of these things that go directly against the vows that you made to each other. You're literally breaking this vow. And it's like, oh, but love covers a multitude of sin. Let's talk about that. No, we don't talk about that. Just go with what I said. No,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about that. You see what I'm saying? And so the people that did not really want to lean into that with me, they just didn't hear it. And what ended up
Yeah.
happening, and this correlates with hurt that I could have associated with church hurt. It was
Yeah.
more so church people. I have a wonderful church. I have a wonderful pastoral staff that walked me through this process, that counseled us, that counseled me,
That's
that
good.
was there with me every step of the way. So I was very blessed and fortunate to be a part of the church that I'm a part of. They held both of us accountable, and they definitely talked about things that both of us needed to do to make it work. And when those things were not met, while they weren't like, yay, divorce, they were also like, listen, health, you need to be healthy. And we understand. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
but for the people that were not along that line, it created this bitterness for me that I had
Yeah.
to really walk through because while I understand the admiration and the honor and the love for the institution of marriage, because I've had it my whole
Yeah.
life as a Christian and as someone who has family that's been married for decades upon decades. My parents have been married for almost 55 years. So like I've seen it, I love it, and all of those things. But the people who spoke against me deciding to get a divorce with valid reasons, they were so for the marriage that they did not see me as a
Yep.
person, as a
Yep.
human. And I
Yep.
that broke my heart, if I have to be
Mhm.
really honest. People
Mhm.
that we had become friends with, you know how you get married and you get married friends and you excited because single
Mhm.
friends can't always relate to you when you married. So
Yeah.
there's like already this breaking away from what you used to know to become this new person when you're trying to become one. And now these two that are one need friends who are also one,
Yeah.
and then they pick sides, and it that was
Wow.
very hurtful. It was very
Yeah.
hurtful, and I had to navigate that really through a lot of prayer. I was
Mhm.
just asking God not to allow my heart to be hardened, for me to
Mhm.
understand too. It was hard at first, but I had to remind myself not to take it personally. This is
Mhm.
more of a generational and more of a religious thing. It's a theme within what you experience in the church world. And so it's
Yeah.
not so much that that one person decided that I didn't matter more than my marriage. It was more so that we have all been trained to elevate marriage above individual people.
Yeah.
And
Like that.
I can't be mad at a person for just doing what we've been trained to do. However,
Mhm.
I can have these conversations, these hard and uncomfortable conversations, and remind people that people who are going through divorce, separation, or infidelity, whatever it is, are real people, real feelings, and they should be cared for in
Yeah.
whatever capacity can be applied.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said too about just talking about individuality, right? And I think that that is so important. And even what you said too, I was just having a conversation with my little cousin about that because she left the church and she was asking me, well, how did you get back into the church? And then that's what I told her, like, I'm not there for the people anymore. Like now I'm there
Mhm.
for my relationship. You know what I'm saying? So now I even navigate church and look at it differently. And there's this shame, right? Because again, my platform is solely on infidelity. And I've had a couple of people come on the show and I might ask them a question or two, and then they'll say, because their marriage is still flourishing and happy, and they'll say stuff like, "Oh, well, see, I don't believe in divorce," and I've had to stop them and say, "Nobody believes in divorce. Like nobody gets married with the, you know what I'm saying, with the thought or the plan or the desire, oh, that this is going to end in divorce." And I had to tell them, like, hey, you have to be careful about how you, like, I understand why you're saying that because that is how you believe. I said, but if somebody, and this is even for the church, if somebody has come to you and said, hey, I'm ending my marriage. First of all, you don't know the strength that it took that person to even share that with you. But also, you don't understand the shame that people are connecting with now saying, I'm ending my marriage in divorce. And so, even talk about that because you talk a lot about safety, which we're going to get into, but just that shame part that comes with having to navigate a divorce, because you already mentioned we go to the church and sometimes the church is not your church, thankfully, but sometimes the constitution of church will kind of say you need to, by all means, sister, stay, like you said, take this class. So
Yeah.
funny, classic response. But talk about that shame and how that shows up for people.
So, in my series, Nine Things I Wish I Would Have Known as a Christian Bride, the last point that I talk about is, deciding to take the right path for you.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a line that I say, there came a point when I decided, the day I decided to leave, there came a point where I realized the shame that I would carry, the shame that I carried for staying in the marriage far outweighed the shame I knew I carried for leaving. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing about it is, when you're going through something that causes you to want to break a marriage, um, shame is involved regardless. You just have to pick
Yeah.
which one is worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
The shame of staying. I've seen people who have worked through infidelity. I've seen
Yep.
people who have worked through physical abuse. I've seen people who work, and you know what? God bless them. If you can work and it gets better, God bless you, because divorce is hard even when it's right. But
Mm-hmm.
if you decide to walk away, there is there's so many different levels of shame that you deal with, right? And I think the first thing I thought about was my wedding day. And I thought
Mm-hmm.
about all the preparation that went into this big celebration, the
Yeah.
dress and the flowers and the people and the favors and the decorations and the photography and the music and the dance and the reception and all of the money that people gave and all of the people that stood as witness in this big declaration and the cheeky stuff that people say, because we got married on March 4th, and so the church folk, oh, you're gonna March 4th, and I'm like, okay, all right. That's, we just picked March 4th because it was a cheaper day, people. Like, it's not that serious. Relax. I know y'all like a good cliche, but calm
Exactly.
down. And so, like, I thought about that day. And
Mm-hmm.
that's actually one of the posts that kind of that you were referencing earlier with the wedding day, like all that work and what did it get me? I thought about that day. And I
Uh-huh.
thought about, like, wow, here I am contemplating divorce. And I put all of that work into that day. And I make these promises in front of God, in front of my pastor, in front of all of these people.
Yeah.
And I'm breaking this vow now. I am
Mhm.
ending this contract. And I felt the shame for that because, like you
Yeah.
said, nobody goes into marriage thinking, oh, I can't wait for this to end a divorce. Divorce is hard, it's ugly, it's
Yeah.
expensive. Like, nobody gets married thinking, cool, I'll get divorced. Like, no, you get married with the thought that we're gonna live happily ever after. Whether you believe in God or not, that's the story that we're told. That's what
Mhm.
social media and movies and television, the happy ever after. That's what we chase after. And so I
Yeah.
felt like I failed. I felt like I failed in my contract. I felt like it was a bad deal. I questioned my judgment on being able to pick a partner. I questioned my ability to see something through. I questioned my ability as a Christian to cover all of the sins with the multitude of love, or however you're supposed to say that. I questioned my ability to forgive. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm supposed to forgive 7 times 77, but at the same time, how much abuse do I take in relation to that?
Yes,
And
ma'am.
so there were a lot of questions and a lot of shame that came with the decision that I'm ending this. But how I combated that shame was reminding myself of all the work that I did. It
Ooh, I
wasn't
like
like
that.
I just woke up one day and was like, you know what? Actually, I'm gonna try something different. You know how people be like, post this picture. I felt cute, might delete later. I'm like, I got married, felt cute, might end it later. That was not a thing. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, it
Mhm.
wasn't a casual thought. It was a gradual decision that
Yeah.
was made based on the results of my tries,
Yeah.
on therapy, on couples therapy, on couples retreats, on
Yeah.
reading books, on doing fasts, on doing affirmations, praying together, separated in the household, all of these different fighting, crying, arguing, writing letters, buying gifts, a million apologies, everything that you could think of to do
Yeah.
that was legal and godly, I
Uh-huh.
did it.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
went to the sex therapist. I took the twerk classes. I did all the things. Okay, I did all the things,
Yeah.
and my marriage did not recover. And so
Mhm.
I had to think to myself, I feel like I failed. However, I did the work, and so I
Yeah.
didn't lose. I learned.
Ooh. Yes, ma'am.
I
Yeah.
didn't lose. I
Yeah.
learned.
Mhm.
And because this is a team sport. And so if I play to the best of my ability and my teammate is not being a team player, that's not on me.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's so I had to settle within myself that I'm making a good decision for myself. Now,
Yeah.
the next layer of shame kind of came in when I made the decision and settled within myself with people. Because people are always gonna have opinions. Like my daddy always say, opinions are like buttholes. Everybody got one. You know what I'm saying? And I like
Yes,
to add
daddy.
on, not all of them are clean. Some of them stink because people don't be
Exactly.
washing. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Yes,
It's a
ma'am.
shameless plug. It's hot. Y'all better be taking them showers and whatnot. But anyway,
In Texas twice a day.
three if you need it. But here we are, and I'm in this decision, and I'm settled. I'm at peace within myself. Now I
Yeah.
gotta. It's one thing to be in your own bubble and you good, but when you go out into public spaces, whether you have a platform like mine or not, people are gonna make opinions. And so now I am being hit with the shame of other people's opinions. Oh, you gave up. Oh, you just didn't do enough. Oh no, but I did da da da. That's still not enough. They're never satisfied. And so how I combated that was again going back to the foundation of the decision I made between me and God.
Yes.
God, this is what I learned. This is what I tried. This is what I learned. And I had peace within myself to make this decision to leave. And when I tell you, my life has been so blessed. And I
I
felt
love it.
the shame that I felt with saying that at first, because it's like you get this
Mhm.
picture in your head that, oh well, if you failed and you divorced, you're supposed to be some lonely old hag that is single the rest of her life, and
Yep.
you wear a
Unhappy.
on your chest, and you unhappy, and you just nah. I have been thriving. God is breathing the things that I've been doing. He's been just blowing open opportunities and doors for me to walk through that I could not walk through attached to such a toxic marriage.
Mhm.
And, I'm going to say this and then I'll be quiet. The scripture that says, God maketh one rich and addeth no sorrow, right?
Uh-huh.
That applies to people who walk through divorce too. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. Just because I did something for myself that God doesn't necessarily like, because again, his nature is unity, not division, but he loves me more. His word
Mhm.
says it. And so because he loves me more and he loves to bless his children, and I'm one of his children, I'm in alignment now with everything because I'm healthy. I'm in a healthy space. I'm making good
Mhm.
decisions. I have positive self talk, all of these different things. So he is breathing on that and blessing that. And so now I'm more vibrant. I'm healthier. I've shed
Yeah.
weight. I'm growing. All these things have happened since I left. And I like to call that confirmation of a good decision.
Whew. You know what? Okay, so that goes into one question that I wanted to ask you. I reshared a post where Tisha Campbell Martin was talking about she had a diagnosis of something. I can never, I think it's anyways, I'm not even gonna try to because I'm gonna mess it up. But she was talking about she had this diagnosis and then she shared that when she left her marriage, she got a divorce. She hasn't had any side effects of it. In fact, you know which one I'm talking about?
Yes, I just
Yeah.
saw that last week.
Okay, yeah. And she was like, in fact, like the doctors and stuff, they can't even, see it connecting to her nerves and stuff. And so it's kind of a two-part question. Because you mentioned that you were in a dark space, that you had depression. I think you even mentioned like some suicidal ideations, some thoughts, from time to time. Um, but so I want to know about that, like when you were in that dark space, but also what was that moment of sigh of relief for you where you were like, this is the right decision? Like, I
Ooh.
made the right decision.
Okay, I'm going to answer that second half in two parts. But the first one, you asked like some of the things that I went through.
Yeah.
I was severely depressed. I went through a lot in my marriage. In short, I gained a bunch of weight. Which some of that, is to be expected. You can gain happy weight just because you gain weight
Yeah.
does not
Yeah.
mean that, it's a bad marriage. But I gained a lot of weight that I could not get off.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, now some of that was a medical issue, which I have been working on for the last year and a half, and so been dealing with that. But I will say I believe that the marriage worsened it because when you're depressed, you are unmotivated to do a whole lot of stuff. And stress
Yeah.
medically, from a biological standpoint, specifically with women, when we deal with stress, it increases our cortisol, goes straight to our belly, our hips, all of that stuff. So, and that's where I carried a lot of my stress. Had
Mm-hmm.
tension. I remember I went to a physical therapist one day, and they said it'll take 6 months to get these knots out of your back. I was like,
Oh my gosh.
what makes you think I got 6 months worth of money to be coming here? Okay, thank you. If I was
Like
that
once a
stressed,
month or once a week, how often were you gonna have to go?
once a week for 6 months. They say you need to be here once a week for 6 months for us to work these kinks out.
Yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
said, I guess I'm gonna just be stressed, and I was. So, you're dealing with all of those things. How I figured out that I was dealing with depression, one day I just kind of woke up and I was like, I really don't care if I live or die. And there's a lot of things that kind of went through that, right? So I won't
Yeah.
necessarily say that it was all on my marriage, but I
Yeah.
will say, I will talk a little bit about how I kind of discovered that my marriage was a big part of the problem. So, one, I talk a lot about grief on my platform because for people who don't know how I kind of got started with the comedy, it's a coping mechanism
Yeah.
for the grief that I've been dealing with since my oldest sister, Karen, passed away. And so before I started all of this, my reactions and all of that kind of stuff, that's what I used to do with her. I would send her funny videos, funny memes, funny
Okay.
quotes, different things like that. And I was standing next to her while she was watching it or reading it and react. So I would do commentary, all of that. Exactly what I do on my platform, I did with her in person. And so
Okay.
when she died, I lost that sense of camaraderie. I lost that connection that I had with her. So when
Mm-hmm.
a couple years went by, TikTok came out or got bigger during the pandemic, and I went on there and like really started laying into reactions, and people enjoyed my laughter. They enjoyed, just the ridiculous things that I say when I'm reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, y'all like this too? This is great because this reminds me of her. And
Mm-hmm.
so like I was doing that and dealing with the grief. So that was a part of the depression, just trying to figure out how to exist in a world where my person, the one who made me feel seen and understood, was not there.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a pain point in my marriage too. I used to get into arguments with my ex-husband because I would talk to him about how lonely I felt. And he's just like, well, I'm right here. What is that? And I'm like, this is not about you. This is
Mm-hmm.
about my person being gone.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know how to articulate, and he didn't know how to understand. So we were
Mhm.
kind of like missing each other in that capacity. And then also I was unhappy with my life's work, right? I knew that I had a call to the entertainment industry. I knew that but I didn't know how to put the pieces together. And
Yeah.
so now you add this marriage where I'm married to a person who is counteractive to all the things I'm trying to build.
Mhm.
So I don't get into a whole lot of detail, but I do mention this in my series where I talk about different ways dealing with compatibility, right? So a lot of times we don't talk enough from a church perspective about compatibility. It's usually just, is it suitable? Does he go to church? Does he pray? Da 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 da. And
Mhm.
I'm like, for the way that I knew my life was going in a lane of working in a entertainment field, being an actor, being an entertainer, being a comedian, being a photographer, videographer, director, like all the things. I needed someone who would not be insecure, who would be able to trust me to hold my space in the spotlight and also cover me and protect me. But I did not have that. I had somebody who was competing with me and dragging me down, and pulling apart my creativity, which
Mhm.
made me shut down and made me hoard my creativity. I had to protect my baby, right? So
Mhm.
now I'm in my home where I should feel like I can be the most expressive and I'm the least expressive because I am now afraid to show who I am as a creative person, who I believe God has called me to be, because you're going to tear it down.
Mhm.
So, all of that to say, when I started going to therapy, that was the first thing that I said to my therapist. There was a new therapist, and she said, "So, what brings you here today?" And I said, "Yeah, I don't care if I live or die." And she's like, "Wow,
Oh.
let's unpack that." That was a
Yeah.
pretty bold statement.
That's how you started.
That's how I started with my new
Mhm.
therapist, God bless her. And she was just like, "Okay, let's talk about it."
Mhm.
And what I went through was I gave her two analogies. I'm a big analogy person, like how Jesus would give analogies. That's kind of how I operate when I'm communicating with people. And I gave her two analogies. One, I told her, and this is exclusive, I never actually shared this before. I told her that I felt like I was standing in a kitchen surrounded by milk on the floor. And I was like, I'm so surrounded by it. The floor is covered in it. I see that the milk is pouring out from the container. There's just so much of it. I don't know where to start to
Mm.
gather and clean it up. And I feel overwhelmed by the sight of it. And all I can think about is how it's gonna stink, how it's gonna be sticky, how I'm gonna be out of milk and I won't be able to cook, how if I step in one direction, I'm getting it all over myself. That's how I kind of gauge. So every week when we would meet, it would be, so where are we with the milk?
Okay.
And so, as we started talking about my background and my upbringing and just dealing with me and how I view myself and the different things that I've dealt with, it would be like, okay, the milk is in front of me. It's still on the floor, but it's in front of me. And so, we got to a point where, like, I could start seeing the end of the tunnel with clearing up the milk. But then one day, this maybe 2 months in, I told her, I was like, now there's juice on the floor and it's sticky and the ants are coming. And she said to me, Crystal, I think the milk on the floor is your marriage.
Oh, really? Wow.
And I was like, because in my mind, right, the Christian brain in me was like, that can't be it because I want the marriage. I mean, the milk. I want the milk off the floor. It can't be my marriage because we're not supposed to get divorced.
Mhm.
And she said, I think the milk, when I started talking about the different things going on in my marriage, she said, I see a correlation here. And she was like, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just identifying. I think the biggest problem that you have right now is leading you back to your marriage. And
Mm.
so I say all of that to say, as I started healing myself and healing my perspective, my self esteem, like all of the things that were
Yep.
about me, the better I got. And that was kind of what we talked about, right? The analogy with the milk, but we also talked about a sunflower. I had told her I'd always felt like a sunflower in a sea of roses, and I was ashamed to be a sunflower. But the more I started embracing being the sunflower that God made me, and I'm standing tall and I'm reaching toward the sun, all of these things, the healthier my plant became,
Mhm.
the worse my marriage got. So as I
Mhm.
started losing weight, And my face started clearing up, and I started being more colorful, and I started seeing more traction with my career. I was getting booked more, and my social media
Wow.
followers were, all of these things, these good things were happening to me. And I was
Yeah.
getting in more arguments, and I felt more isolated by my husband, and all of these other things started happening in my marriage, and I was like, this is out of balance. How can I be better as a person and my marriage is crumbling? It doesn't make sense.
Mhm.
So, to answer the second part of your question, when I felt relief, the first time I felt relief was the day I took my ring off for the first time.
Okay.
I was sitting in therapy, and I told her, this was after like a umpteenth time getting into an argument. But I took my ring off. I was playing with it, and I said, this feels like a shackle. I
Hmm.
just took it off for a second. And for the first time in a while, I just took a deep breath, and I was like, it shouldn't feel like this, but it does. Yeah, that was a telltale sign. That did something for me.
Yep.
It
Mhm.
did something for me. And then I think when I gave myself permission to think about, this is not a death sentence. I don't have to be in this marriage forever. I
Mhm.
don't have to be in this toxic place forever. It gave me peace to think of the possibilities of what could be.
Yeah. Yeah. I was already smiling when you were sharing that because I was like, "Oh, I know it's gonna be good." Because I love to hear everybody's aha moment. Like, okay, you know what? It's safe here. It's so
Yeah.
safe here.
Yes.
And we're winding down on time, but I do want to speak to this because, or I want to ask you this so that you can speak to it because you give such great input. But even in your story, you mentioned about there were multiple instances of infidelity. So like when I first heard that, I was like, oh, okay, so maybe it was okay for me to reach out to her for the podcast. But and you managed to stay. And part of my story is, shoot, I stayed for 5 years post finding out the first time. And I found out about another woman every 6 months, like clockwork. Like it just did not stop. So from 2015 to 2020, I found out about an additional woman every 6 months. And I know what I did, and how I managed to stay, and all of the justifications that I accepted for his actions and things like that. I kind of speak to how you justified staying post infidelity, and what not to do, so that women who may be going through this can understand, like, the mistakes that we made and our rationalizations for why we stayed, kind of helping them to understand, like, no, sis, that's actually not the healthy way to navigate that.
Now, that's such an important question, and I want to take a second to just express my gratitude for your platform. Because it's such a difficult and shame-filled walk, especially from a Christian perspective. And I think that's really where I sat in it and stayed. The first
Mhm.
time that I found out about inappropriate behavior with other women was year one, and I remember telling myself it wasn't that big of a deal. um I remember reminding myself of all of the older couples that I knew who had been married for 30 years, and had all of them had been through that same
Yep.
thing. And I thought
We
to
do
myself,
that. We
well,
do it.
we everybody has something, we'll get past it. We'll laugh about this when we're older. That was kind of the first thing. So I already started kind of conditioning myself. And then as the years went by, different aspects of it would come to light. Um,
Mhm.
but there was a particular time kind of in the middle, where a lot of stuff started coming to light. People started coming to me. There were rumors floating around. It made me uncomfortable to be in public spaces. And I'm just
Oh,
like,
wow.
all right, this is getting out of hand, right? So where I was struggling with that was, I was leaning into the scripture, into First Corinthians, where it talks about love, and at the end of that chapter it says, when you love somebody, you stand your ground in defending them. So that's what I would do. I love
Mhm.
my man, so I'm standing my ground. Don't you talk about my man. You take his name out your mouth, you take my name. Then I would go home and be like, why are you embarrassing me like this? What is it that keeps you entertaining these other things, right?
Mhm.
I internalized it for a while, and I blamed myself. I thought it was
Mhm.
me. I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not sexy enough. I don't do enough in the bedroom. I don't dress, the way that he wants me to dress. Or, He justified it in certain aspects. Like he was apologetic, but it was just like, well, I want these things, and I want if you would just do da 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 da. And the mistake in that is I care what kind of improvements can be made on both ends. It, and this is one of the things that I talk about in my series. Behavior explained is not behavior excused.
Yeah.
Just because I can explain why you do something does not mean that that's an excuse for you to do it. And I'm sorry does not work.
Mm-hmm.
If you really sorry, change your behavior.
Yep.
If this is a
Yep.
pattern, and that's the difference, right? Can somebody make a mistake and then they completely do a 180 and we not doing that same thing again and we're on a better path and we can recover from infidelity and we can have a thriving, yes, that
Yeah.
can happen. And I pray to
Mm-hmm.
God, anybody who's listening who has been through that, I pray that that is your case. It
Mm-hmm.
can happen, it will happen, all those things. There's a difference between a mistake and a pattern of behavior. And when you
Yes.
have proven to me time and time again that you cannot be trusted, that you have
Mm-hmm.
zero respect for our union, at that point, your pattern of behavior is in direct opposition to our union, and that is disrespectful to me as a
Yeah.
woman, as a person. Because it's not just men who do it; it's women who do it too. So that's
Yep.
disrespectful to me as your spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I have to make a decision. You have broken the contracts of our vows, and I do not have to stand for it,
Yeah.
because when you think about all of the things that go into infidelity, especially when it's a behavior and not a
Mm-hmm.
mistake, you
Mm-hmm.
open yourself up to STDs, you open
Mm-hmm.
yourself up to extramarital children.
Yep.
What kind of example is being set for your children? If you
Mm-hmm.
have kids, thankfully I didn't have any kids, but what
Mm-hmm.
kind of example is being set for your children?
Yeah.
Then you think about resentment. I've seen people who have walked through infidelity and are still working through it, but the trust that is broken.
Yep.
How can you have a solid marriage if there's no trust? You start thinking about the resentment that you hold. Anytime they do anything, now I'm thinking about that one time you cheated on me. Like there's so many things,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? It's a very real thing. So there's so many things that go into it. And so I would just recommend one, examine, is this a mistake or is this a pattern of behavior?
Yes.
And that's kind of like that's that scale that you're kind of weighing on, because a mistake not everybody will recover from, but you can recover from. A pattern of
Mm-hmm.
behavior, that's in that person.
Mm-hmm.
That's in
Mm-hmm.
that person, and you do not
And you
have to
can't
switch.
change it.
You can't change
No
that.
amount of praying or changing yourself, like you
No,
said, going to the sex classes, none of that. Like you can't change it.
you can't change that. And so what you have to do is, one, take yourself off the hook. It's not your fault that they keep cheating on you. And
Mm-hmm.
two, you have to decide, only you can decide, can you live with that or not?
Yeah.
And if you can't, that's okay, because you're
Mm-hmm.
not supposed to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Girl, you done gave a whole master class
My pleasure.
on
My
that.
my pain is now my pleasure. So
Exactly. And I love that. Like your pain is now your pleasure and your purpose. Like that's what I was thinking about too. And I was just thinking about you. I was like, I love how, like you said, you're building on your platform, but also I think finding your purpose too, because you're able to bring laughter to people, but then also sharing your story, which provides encouragement and inspiration to let people know, like, hey, you can get through this. If you're going through this, look at me now. Like I've come through it. And one of the things that I always think, like I have to ask you this before we get out of here. Because shame is already attached to this. And when we get into a divorce, whether it is whatever the situation is, but definitely with infidelity, there's so many insecurities, and that's really what you were talking about, right? Like you would find out about these discoveries, and then like you had all of these insecurities that came out, and how much of that, because I know that we're all responsible for ourselves, but I believe that you can gauge how a person is treating their partner based off of how that person's security is for
Mhm.
producing. Like I feel like that's a good reflection of the health of the relationship, because myself as a woman, my I should be helping my husband to flourish in his esteem, and and then vice versa. And because I'm like you, outside of the shame, I was experiencing a lot of insecurities, a lot of doubts, and I think that also that was coupled with everything that I was going through in my marriage. And so, what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think too that that's like a good telltale sign? Like, if this person is lessening your self esteem and not building and growing into you, that's a red flag too.
Absolutely. Marriage is all about a reflection, right? Marriage, from a biblical standpoint, is supposed to reflect our relationship with God. That's why, Jesus is the bridegroom and the church is the bride of Christ. And then within marriage, we are supposed to be a reflection of one another. And not a exact, because we complement, we don't complete. We are not
Yeah.
marrying the same
Mm-hmm.
person. We have those differences, but we should be a reflection of one another and how we love. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
why when scripture says love your neighbor as you love yourself, how can I love my neighbor if I do not love myself, right? And
Yeah.
so granted, I was dealing with somebody who very clearly had some mental things going on that needed to be addressed, but it does not completely circumvent the need for self-love. And
Mm-hmm.
so in on the occasions where communication would be, you need to lose some weight,
Mm-hmm.
I do. Like, if we needed to be honest, I absolutely did. However, so do you, but that. So instead of talking to yourself about it, you were telling me that I don't dress attractive enough and you're not attracted to me anymore and all of those things. You have not asked me, "Hey, are you attracted to me or what I
Yeah.
like?" Instead, you're going to tear down because my personality is to internalize everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're not enjoying sex, is my fault. Oh, we're not, feeling that lovey-dovey feeling, is my fault. It's Everything is always my fault. And I did that for a myriad of reasons, I'm sure, that I'm still in therapy for. But I think that it's important to, like, definitely take a moment and think about how you feel about yourself, because it will come out in
Yeah.
how you treat your partner.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Man, like I said, I just want to say thank you so much for this. Um, I always ask people before we close out, what is life after infidelity? But for you, I would say, what would you say life after divorce is? You know,
Oh man, life after divorce. Oh, in just one word, I'd probably say just discovery.
yeah, I
Um,
like that.
I am finally, for the first time in my life, really discovering who I am and who I was always meant to be.
Mhm.
I'm finally, for the first time, giving myself permission to be 100% Crystal, and not who my husband wants me to be, not who the church wants me to be, not who my family wants me to be. I'm just me. And it took being kind of ground down to feeling like I was nothing, and not just in marriage, but the whole walk through, the shame of divorce, and like all of the things. It took and it's like, I got nothing to lose now. So let me just
Yeah.
be myself. And so it's
Mhm.
just discovering what I like, what I don't like, what works for me, what doesn't work for me, where I want to go, where I want to visit, who I want
Yeah.
to, meet, all those things. It's discovery. And it's hard, it's scary, but it's worth
Mhm.
it.
Yeah. Yes. If you don't mind, will you close us out today? And I just want you to speak to that person. It can be a man or a woman, but someone who is struggling in their marriage, and there's a lot of shame attached to the decision that they know that they want to make. And they may even have some confusion. And they're, like we've talked about this episode, have insecurities attached to that. So just kind of close us out, and speak to that woman or man, to help them navigate that and encourage them through that.
Absolutely. You beautiful human, whomever you are, man or woman, young or old, I understand what it's like to be in a position where you have doubts, you have fears, you have worries. Did I make the right choice? Should I stay? Should I go? What will people think? How will people feel? I know what that's like. And I want to tell you, first and foremost, you are not crazy, that you are not alone, that there can be and will be a solution that you will find, that you will discover. Whether that is to stay or to leave is to be determined. But I want to remind you that it's okay for you to have feelings. It's okay to feel your feelings. It's okay to um, discover what will work for you and for your family, and to make a decision, right? I think sometimes we get so lost in this idea that we have to decide our lives right now, today. But you could just take a moment and feel how you feel, and just, I highly recommend therapy. Having a good therapist, a licensed therapist who can help you walk through not only the journey of discovering where you are and where you want to go, but to hold you accountable to that health journey, to make healthy quality decisions. And I also want to encourage you that whether you stay or leave, that you will be okay, that you can find solid community who will hold space for you, and that as a human person, it's important that you be seen um, in conjunction with whatever situation you're in. So whether you are trying to recover from infidelity, or whether you're considering divorce, or whatever it is, for whatever reason, yes, your marriage matters, but also you as a person, you matter. All right. And as I said earlier, God does hate divorce because he hates division, but he loves you more. And so, whatever it is that you're going through, whether you are the person who cheated or you've been cheated on, or whatever it is, yeah, those things are not great. But God still loves you. God loves you more. And there is space for you to grow and to heal and to flourish. And so, just be encouraged in that, and know that I love you too.
Thank you so much, Crystal. This episode has been amazing. Um, what it has reminded me is that perfect love really does cast out all fear. And so,
Agreed.
whatever decision that you make because God loves you, don't be
Mhm.
afraid to make that decision.
Yes.
Thank you again, Crystal. This is an amazing episode. I hope that whoever is listening to this, it provides you some clarity and confidence on moving forward in the next step in your marriage. My name is Brianna Latrice, your favorite affair recovery coach, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye, beautiful people.
See you later.